Ethan leaned against the window of his tiny apartment, staring out at the distant city lights. The sky beyond his reflection hung heavy with the threat of rain. The soft glow from the street lamps below stretched ghostly shadows onto the walls inside, and he could feel his pulse flutter in his chest. A few clothes were scattered around the living room, a blouse draped over the arm of the couch, a skirt half folded on the coffee table. They belonged to a person he only half remembered being. That person's name was Eliza. He was 27, living alone, and working a predictable office job downtown. He usually wrapped up his shift at 6 in the evening before trudging home under the flickering light of old street lamps. About a year ago, he had begun to explore a secret side of himself. One late night, on a whim, he had tried on an old dress belonging to an ex-roommate who had left some boxes behind. The garment felt oddly comforting. He stood in front of the mirror, noticing the shift in posture, the calming effect of seeing a different image in the reflection. Yet, what started as an occasional indulgence soon blossomed into something more. He found new outfits, a wig, shoes that fit him better. He named this persona Eliza. Dressing that way helped him relax, especially when the world felt too large. At first, Eliza was present only for short periods, an hour or two on a Friday night, maybe a Saturday afternoon if he felt particularly anxious. Then entire evenings began to blur. He would look at the clock and realize hours had vanished while he wore Eliza's clothes. And in those hours, he felt a respite from the everyday grind. But over the past few weeks, the calm had transformed into dread. Someone, or something, had begun rearranging the outfits in his closet. Skirts he didn't recall owning showed up in his wardrobe. Bills popped up for online purchases he had no memory of making. Worse, he would wake up and notice items in his apartment out of place. An empty teacup on the kitchen counter, even though he remembered washing the dishes the previous night. A train of footprints on the rug near the door, yet he didn't recall going out. A dozen small details that might seem trivial in isolation, yet together they fueled a swelling sense of unease. He left the window and walked into his tiny kitchen. He stared at the kettle, wondering if he had boiled water that morning. The ring of condensation on the counter suggested it had been used recently. As he was about to grab the kettle, his phone vibrated on the table. The screen showed the name of his psychiatrist, Dr. Crow. "Ethan?" came Dr. Crow's measured tone when he answered. "How are you holding up today?" He forced a dry laugh. "Same as usual, tired, a little confused." "Confused in what sense?" Dr. Crow asked. Ethan glanced around, feeling a spike of paranoia that made his heart clench. "The sense that I'm losing track of what I'm doing. I'm still noticing changes in my apartment. It's like someone's been here." "Let's talk more about that at our session tomorrow," Dr. Crow said gently. "In the meantime, try to note anything unusual. Keep up with the journal." Ethan had started keeping a diary on the psychiatrist's advice, detailing the times he believed he was Eliza and the times he believed he was himself. Half of the entries looked as though they were written in his usual neat handwriting. The other half were written in an elaborate cursive. He stared at those pages sometimes, wondering if he had penned them while half asleep, or if there really was something else at play in his mind. He ended the call and sank onto his battered couch. He tried to recall the previous evening in detail. After returning from work, he remembered feeling exhausted, so he had microwaved leftover pasta. Then, he remembered sorting through some laundry. Or had he? The memory was fuzzy. Stray images of him, no, Eliza, trying on a bright floral dress danced through his head. He wondered if it had been a dream, or if that had genuinely happened. It was impossible to say for sure. A sudden clap of thunder jolted him. He realized he was gripping the blouse that rested on the arm of the couch. It smelled faintly of perfume. Was it his perfume? He couldn't recall ever buying one, But he had found that bottle in the bathroom cabinet a week ago. Strange that he didn't remember the purchase, yet the flowery aroma lingered in his apartment. The next day, Ethan arrived at Dr. Crow's office, an old townhouse converted into a practice. The waiting room smelled of lavender. One entire wall displayed shelves of books on psychology, psychiatry, and other medical topics. A hush hung in the air, interrupted only by the soft hum of the air conditioner. Dr. Crow soon emerged to welcome him into a cozy office with 2 chairs and a small table. "Ethan, good to see you," Dr. Crow said. The psychiatrist was in his mid-50s, with silver streaks in his hair and an even temperament that usually put Ethan at ease. But now, the weight of dread clung to Ethan's shoulders. "It's nice to see you too," Ethan replied, settling into the chair. He tried to speak calmly, but his voice trembled. Dr. Crow wasted no time. "You mentioned unusual occurrences. Can you describe them in detail?" "It's hard to pin down," Ethan said. "I keep finding clothes I don't remember buying. Bills are appearing for purchases I can't recall, and it's not just that. I'll wake up in different places in my apartment. My bed will be untouched, but I'll be on the couch as if I'd fallen asleep there. Only, I don't remember lying down." "How often does this happen?" Dr. Crow asked. "At least 4 times in the last 2 weeks." Ethan rubbed his temples. "I'm starting to think I'm doing all this without realizing it. It might be stress, or maybe I'm just not sleeping well, but it feels too organized to be random. Some days it seems like there's a second person living in my apartment, going about their own routine." Dr. Crow scribbled a note. "You've told me about Eliza. That persona is significant to you. Is it possible that under stress, you might be drifting into that role without conscious awareness?" "It might be that," Ethan replied. He paused, weighing how to explain the dread in his gut. "But something else worries me. I feel different, physically and mentally, when I am Eliza. I just don't recall the precise moment of switching. It's like snapping awake in a room where the lights have changed." "Tell me more about that difference," Dr. Crow encouraged. "Sometimes I look in the mirror as Eliza, and I see someone confident, someone who stands straighter. But other times, I find the wig on the floor, the lipstick smeared on the sink, and I can't remember how any of that happened. It's as if I blinked, and the scenario changed around me." Dr. Crow tapped his pen thoughtfully. "Have you considered that you might be blacking out or experiencing a form of dissociation under pressure? It isn't uncommon for individuals with extreme stress to have memory gaps." "I get that, logically," Ethan said, trying to compose himself. "But part of me wonders if I'm being manipulated. I know it sounds paranoid, but maybe someone found out about Eliza, and they're messing with me, hiding things, ordering outfits in my name, just to watch me unravel." Dr. Crow listened intently. "We can't rule out the possibility, but we should also consider simpler explanations before we assume there's an outside influence. What if we set up cameras in your apartment to record what happens when you believe you're losing time?" Ethan raised an eyebrow, intrigue piqued by the suggestion. "I was thinking about doing that already, but I hesitated. It's scary to see yourself from the outside. Still, I think I'm at a point where I need to know." Dr. Crow jotted the plan down. "Give it a try. Keep the journal going as well, and let's schedule more frequent sessions to discuss whatever footage you gather." Ethan nodded. Relief mingled with fear. He wasn't sure he truly wanted to see what those recordings would reveal. On his way home, he stopped by an electronics store and purchased a couple of basic security cameras. That evening, he carefully placed one in his living room, angled toward the couch and the adjoining kitchenette, and another in his bedroom, facing the bed and the closet. He tested them to ensure they stored recordings properly on his laptop. Then, taking a deep breath, he decided to press the record button. Before heading to bed, he spoke aloud to whatever might be listening, Eliza or something else, his voice echoing softly off the sparse walls. "If you're here, I'll find out." The morning arrived with a thin stream of sunlight that filtered through his curtains. As he opened his eyes, he realized he was on top of the covers, still in his button-down shirt and trousers from the previous day. Normally, he changed into pajamas or something comfortable. With a mixture of anticipation and dread, he sat down at his laptop to review the camera footage. The living room camera showed him pacing anxiously around 9 at night. Then, around 10, he disappeared briefly, presumably into the bedroom. 10 minutes later, a figure stepped back into frame. A person wearing a short, dark wig, a slim-fitting blouse, and a skirt. The transformation was jarring, even though he knew it was him. Yet the person on screen moved with a fluid grace, as if entirely comfortable. The figure, Eliza, sat on the couch with a cup of tea, scrolling through a phone. This continued for about an hour. A couple of times, Eliza rose and moved gracefully around the small apartment. At one point, she rummaged in a drawer. It was too dim to see exactly what she pulled out, but there was a moment where she held an item up to the camera as if examining it. Then, around 11:30, she disappeared off screen. The living room stayed empty for the rest of the night. The camera in the bedroom showed Eliza entering around the same time. In that footage, she walked to the mirror, staring at her reflection. Her lips parted as though she were speaking, but the camera had no audio. Ethan noticed a few dramatic gestures, arms flung up in what seemed like frustration or despair. Then she flicked off the lights. The feed became a dark blur of shapes until morning light began to creep in. No sign of Ethan returning to bed. No sign of anything else. His throat tightened. He had no memory of any of this. He felt disoriented watching himself act in ways that felt both familiar and entirely alien. The footage showed him in full control of his faculties, just different. It made him wonder whether Eliza had a distinct existence in his mind, separate from the person he thought he was. Back at Dr. Crow's office, he showed clips of the recordings to the psychiatrist. They watched the silent footage of Eliza sipping tea, scrolling through a phone in the living room. "Do you recall any of these moments?" Dr. Crow asked. Ethan shook his head. "None. It's like the memory is wiped. Every time I see Eliza in the video, it feels like I'm peering into someone else's life." "Yet that is you," Dr. Crow reminded him, tapping the pen lightly on the desk. "Could be a dissociated state. It's compelling evidence that you're unaware of this behavior. There's no sign of an external intruder." Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "So I'm just losing time. I'm the one doing these things. Is that the simplest explanation?" "For now, yes," Dr. Crow said. "I suggest we keep monitoring. Also, could you try setting an alarm every hour or so in the evening? If you find yourself in an altered state, the alarm might bring you back. Then you can see how frequently you're switching." Ethan nodded. "All right, I'll try." Over the next few days, he followed that plan. He set hourly alarms from 7 until midnight. Whenever an alarm went off, if he felt he was still himself, he jotted down the time in his journal. If he somehow woke from a haze, he noted that. For 2 days, nothing unusual happened. He went to bed each night after hearing the final alarm, and in the morning, he woke up to find everything as it should be. No new clothes, no half-drunk teacups. On the third night, he dozed off around 9, right before the alarm rang. When it sounded at 10, he fumbled for his phone in the dark, only to realize he was wearing a nightgown he couldn't remember putting on. His hair felt different, and when he turned on the light, he saw the wig on the nightstand, a brush set next to it. The shock nearly made him drop the phone. He scrambled for his journal and noted the confusion, the fear that fluttered in his stomach. "I just woke up," he wrote, the pen scratching across the page. It's 10:02 p.m., and I'm wearing Eliza's clothes. I don't remember changing. I must have blacked out for at least half an hour." He stared at the lines, feeling the weight of his words. With trembling hands, he opened the door and tiptoed into the living room. The overhead light buzzed softly, and it revealed a half-empty glass of water on the coffee table. A small bag from a boutique clothing store lay on the couch. Inside it was a lacy top, still tagged, in Eliza's size, not Ethan's usual measurements. He let the bag slip from his hand onto the cushion, mind racing. It confirmed everything he feared. Some part of him was taking control, shopping, acting, living without his conscious input. The next morning he watched the footage again. Sure enough, around 9 that night, Ethan disappeared into the bedroom. 5 minutes later, Eliza walked out, dressed impeccably. She rummaged in the fridge, drank some water, and then set her phone alarm for 10. She must have heard it because exactly at 10, on camera, she hurried back into the bedroom and turned on the bedside lamp. The feed ended with her removing the wig, glancing at the phone. She seemed to exhibit a moment of panic. Then the video ended because Ethan had set it up in hour-long increments. He stared at the final image, heart pounding, noticing a fleeting expression of alarm on Eliza's face. It looked like she recognized something was wrong. Later that week, in another session with Dr. Crow, Ethan relayed these developments. They sat facing each other in the softly lit office, the rain pattering on the windows outside. "So your other persona seems functional, almost self-aware," Dr. Crow observed. "Yes, but not entirely separate. It's more like part of me, only I don't share its memories," Ethan said. "And you're certain no one else is entering your apartment?" He nodded. "I changed the locks just to be sure. The camera footage shows no one else. It's always just me." Dr. Crow sighed. "Have you considered adjusting your work schedule or requesting a short leave? Perhaps taking time to rest will reduce the stress triggers." "I'm scared to be alone too long," Ethan admitted. "What if this other side of me takes over for hours, and I never realize it?" Dr. Crow offered a calming nod. "We could explore different therapy methods. Hypnosis, for one, might help you bridge the gap between these states. But let's proceed carefully." Ethan agreed to try anything. A sense of desperation gnawed at him. He wanted to piece together the puzzle. He felt a swirl of conflicting thoughts, fear of what he might discover, curiosity about how this began, and a longing for stability. Not long afterward, he tried the first hypnosis session. Dr. Crow's voice was calm, guiding him through relaxation exercises. Ethan sank into a trance-like state, feeling as though he were floating. The psychiatrist asked gentle questions about Eliza, her likes, her emotions, what she did when she emerged. Sometimes Ethan answered in his usual voice, but at other moments his tone shifted, adopting a certain confidence. He mentioned favorite dresses, little routines like sipping tea at a window. Dr. Crow probed carefully, asking if there were memories of being teased or ridiculed. Ethan vaguely recalled an incident from college when someone mocked him for wearing a flamboyant costume at a party. The memory was hazy. At no point did anything conclusive emerge, yet the session hinted that Eliza might be more than a passing role. She had her own perspectives, her own preferences, and perhaps her own pain. On his way home from that session, Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, expecting to see a text from Dr. Crow or a friend. Instead, he found a series of messages from an unknown number. "You're not alone in that apartment. I know who you really are. Stop playing pretend, or it'll get worse." A chill spidered along his spine. He glanced over his shoulder, as if expecting someone to be following him. The street was mostly empty, just a couple of passers-by heading to a coffee shop. Anxiety turned his breath shallow. He had assumed that no outside party was involved, but here was a direct threat. His first impulse was to call the number. It went straight to voicemail. Then he thought about going to the police. But what would he say? That he had been receiving cryptic text messages? Would they believe him if he told them everything? Instead, he walked home quickly, nearly sprinting up the stairs to his apartment. Once inside, he checked every corner for signs of an intruder. Nothing seemed amiss. He locked the door behind him, heart pounding. For hours, he sat in a daze, phone in hand, waiting for another message that never came. In his next appointment with Dr. Crow, he revealed the messages, showing the psychiatrist the texts on the screen. Dr. Crow's expression grew serious. "Did you try tracing it?" "It's just a burner phone," Ethan said, exhaling slowly. "I tried calling. No answer. I don't think there's an easy way to find out who's behind it." "Could it be a hoax? Maybe a spam text?" Dr. Crow asked. "Seems too specific," Ethan replied, voice trembling. "It sounds like someone who knows I'm dressing up." Dr. Crow considered the possibilities. "We can't dismiss it. But before jumping to conclusions, let's explore whether there's any chance you might have sent those messages to yourself in a dissociated state." Ethan felt a wave of revulsion. "You think I'd harass myself? That's terrifying." "I know," Dr. Crow answered softly. "But we have to consider all angles. If Eliza is ordering clothes, maybe she, or that part of you, set up a second phone number, a hidden line." He pressed a hand to his forehead, as if trying to contain the onslaught of contradictory thoughts. Could it really be a product of his own mind? The idea made him nauseous, yet it was a possibility that wouldn't let go. He decided to keep the phone on silent and ignore further texts, if any arrived, while focusing on gathering more camera footage. Each night, he positioned himself in front of the lenses, sometimes talking to them in a weary attempt at a video diary. "Another day," he would say with a forced smile. "No new messages since the last time. I'm about to sleep. If I wake up as someone else, well, the camera won't lie." During one of these nights, something different happened. Around 2 a.m., the bedroom camera captured him, Eliza, talking on the phone, the glow of the screen illuminating her face. There was a flicker of agitation as she spoke, pacing back and forth. If Ethan zoomed in on the footage, he could see tears glinting in Eliza's eyes. She gripped the phone tightly, then paused as if listening to someone on the other end. Eventually, she ended the call, flinging the phone onto the bed in frustration. When Ethan woke up, he had a headache and a faint memory of hearing distant voices. Unsure whether it was a dream, he hurriedly grabbed his phone and checked for outgoing calls. There were none logged, which made no sense. He tried cross-referencing the camera footage's timestamp, but his call history showed nothing. It left him with two nightmares. Either the phone Eliza had been using was a different phone entirely, or the call logs were being deleted. The second possibility required forethought, as if this second side of him deliberately covered her tracks. That kind of intelligence was chilling. He also noticed that his normal phone's gallery contained photos he didn't remember taking, pictures of dresses laid out on the bed, mirror selfies of Eliza in full makeup, each one at times of day he would ordinarily be working. That meant either he was skipping work or Eliza was finding pockets of time, possibly on weekends, to dress up in secret. He checked his bank account and credit card transactions. Several new charges were listed from local boutiques and online stores at odd hours. The pit in his stomach grew deeper with every discovered detail. In therapy, Dr. Crow listened intently, occasionally offering measured responses. "We might consider an inpatient program," he finally suggested one afternoon, his voice gentle. "Just for a short while, to help you stabilize. This is getting overwhelming." Ethan shook his head, dread twisting in his gut. "I can't just vanish from my job. People will ask questions. I'm already isolated enough, and I'm afraid if I step away from home, I'd lose track of whatever's going on inside these walls. I need to unravel this, not hide." Dr. Crow nodded in understanding. "I respect your choice, but please be cautious. Keep me updated daily if possible." That night, exhausted, Ethan collapsed onto his couch. The flickering bulb in the floor lamp cast an uneven glow over his living space. He was flipping through his journal, trying to note any new mental blanks, when his phone vibrated. It was another text from that unknown number. "Your secret is safe, for now. Don't make me tell everyone about Eliza." Ethan read the line with a mix of anger and fear. Before he could respond, the phone pinged again. "Meet me at Riverside Park at 11 tomorrow night. Be there alone." He stared at the message. It was too big a risk to ignore, and yet going could be a trap. He debated what to do. The rational side wanted to report it to the police, but he already knew how complicated that would be. A quieter, more desperate side told him that he needed answers, no matter how risky. Maybe the person behind these messages had real information about what was going on. After a sleepless night, Ethan woke with a dull headache. He went to work in a haze, nearly knocking over a stack of folders on his desk. Colleagues noticed he looked unwell, but he brushed off their concerns. He left the office at the usual time, heading home with that text message on repeat in his mind. The park was only a few blocks away. He could leave at 10:45, arrive by 11, and see who was behind all this. Maybe the puzzle pieces would finally snap together. At 10:30, he stared into his bathroom mirror. His reflection looked gaunt, shadows under his eyes. With trembling hands, he splashed water on his face. Then he grabbed his jacket and quietly slipped out of the apartment. The city streets were almost deserted, the hush broken only by the distant roar of traffic and the soft shuffle of late-night pedestrians. Riverside Park at night was dimly lit, its winding paths obscured by tall trees that rustled in the breeze. Ethan walked cautiously, checking every silhouette in the gloom. The air carried the scent of wet grass and the faint aroma of the nearby river. He approached a bench near a broken lamppost, the meeting spot described in the text. No one was there. He waited, breath frosting in the cool air. A shape emerged from behind a tree after 10 tense minutes, a slight figure wearing a dark hoodie. Ethan tensed, feeling the adrenaline spike. The figure paused several yards away, as if sizing him up. "You came," a voice said. It was a young man's voice, somewhat breathless. "I didn't think you would." Ethan struggled to speak. "Who are you? Why have you been texting me?" The figure stepped closer, into a patch of meager lamplight. He appeared to be in his mid-20s, with restless eyes and a thin frame. Ethan didn't recognize him at all. "I had to warn you," the stranger said. "I've seen your other side. I know about Eliza, and there's something off about all of it." Ethan swallowed hard, glancing around to confirm they were alone. "What do you mean you've seen it? Where?" "I live in the building across from yours," he confessed, an edge of nervousness in his voice. "I spotted you on your balcony a few nights, dressed as her. At first I thought it was just someone else visiting you. Then I saw you at your window, changing clothes. It was the same face, but you looked different. Happier, I guess. Anyway, I was curious. Then weird stuff started happening." "Weird how?" Ethan asked, his pulse pounding. The stranger shoved his hands into his hoodie pockets. "Packages kept arriving. A few were dropped off at my place by mistake. Your name was on them. Then I'd see you, or who I thought was you, crossing the street at odd times, except you looked like you didn't recognize me from one day to the next. I got suspicious. I thought I'd get your attention somehow." "So you texted me with threats?" Ethan's voice edged with anger. "I didn't know what else to do," the stranger said, voice trembling. "When I tried to approach you in the hallway once, you looked at me like a stranger. and the next day you walked right by me without a glance. It freaked me out. I thought maybe you were messing with me, or maybe it was someone pretending to be you." Ethan took a slow breath. "Look, I'm dealing with things you wouldn't understand." "Help me understand," the stranger insisted. "Are you two different people?" A swirl of shame and desperation rose in Ethan. "I'm not sure. Eliza is part of me, but I'm losing time. I think I'm developing a separate identity, or I'm in some kind of crisis." "Have you considered that maybe someone else is living in your apartment?" the stranger asked quietly. Ethan felt a jolt. "There's no sign of that. I installed cameras, changed the locks. The footage shows me alone, but not always me. Trust me, I've checked." A breeze stirred the trees overhead, and both men stood silent for a moment. Finally, the stranger spoke again. "I wasn't trying to blackmail you. I just didn't know how to communicate. You seemed dangerous or unstable. I was worried you might do something drastic." His words stung, but Ethan saw a flicker of honesty in his eyes. "Do you know who might be sending me the other messages? Purchases in my name?" The stranger shook his head. "I only sent a few. Yours said you'd gotten more. That wasn't me." Ethan's mind reeled. If the stranger's claim was true, then there was a second unknown person messing with him. Or it was still possible that Eliza was orchestrating everything. The thought made Ethan's stomach churn. "Look, I'm sorry," the stranger said. "If you want me to stay out of your life, I'll back off. But if there's some other person involved, they might be dangerous." Ethan nodded slowly, at a loss for words. "I'll figure it out. Thank you for telling me what you know. But please, don't send me messages like that again." The stranger gave a curt nod, then turned and melted into the darkness. Ethan remained by the bench, feeling a new layer of dread. There was someone else out there with knowledge of his secret. Whether it was a scammer, a stalker, or an aspect of himself, he couldn't tell. The moon slipped out from behind a cloud, illuminating the vacant park path. Alone in the pale glow, Ethan felt a cold sweat on his neck. He realized that the deeper he dug into the mystery, the less certain everything became. In the following days, Ethan tried to piece together a timeline of his blackouts. He pinned notes to a corkboard in his living room. Times he remembered being himself. Times the camera showed Eliza's presence. Details about text messages, unknown transactions, and any fleeting glimpses of suspicious behavior from neighbors. He found patterns. Eliza tended to appear late at night or very early in the morning, often after a period of stress. Each time she emerged, new items ended up in his closet, or outgoing calls were made on a phone not in his possession. That meant either Eliza had a second phone or something else was going on. Yet he was no closer to an answer about the threatening messages that weren't from the stranger. One rainy afternoon, he returned home to find a small package on his doorstep. No return address. His heart raced as he picked it up, suspecting it might be one of those unsolicited deliveries. Inside was a single Polaroid photograph. It showed him as Eliza, wearing an elegant black dress he recognized only from a still frame in his camera footage. This time, he was stepping through the front door of his apartment building, apparently oblivious to the photographer. The back of the photo bore a short note in scrawling ink. "I see you, all of you." His head swam. The picture was proof someone else had captured him in that persona. He flipped the photo again, as if searching for hidden meaning, but there was only that frightening line. He threw the envelope into a drawer, then locked it, fear pulsing in his veins. The sense of being watched, the possibility of an unknown observer, it all coiled inside him like a serpent. He visited Dr. Crow the next day, bringing the Polaroid with him. The psychiatrist studied it with deep concern. "We have evidence now that someone external is involved," Dr. Crow said firmly. "You should go to the police." "I'm afraid they'll dismiss it or ask questions I'm not ready to answer," Ethan replied. He lowered his gaze. "They'll want to see the camera footage, my diary, all of it, and then I'd be forced to explain Eliza." "I understand your hesitation," Dr. Crow said, "but your safety is paramount. If someone's following you, it could escalate." Ethan nodded numbly. He agreed to think it over, though he couldn't shake the feeling that the authorities wouldn't understand, or worse, they'd laugh behind his back. He felt paralyzed. Days slipped by, each one marked by fresh anxieties. Then came another blow. The HR department at his workplace called him in for a meeting. They informed him that co-workers had reported him wandering the office halls at odd hours, wearing unfamiliar clothing, sometimes seeming disoriented. He had no recollection of such incidents. He wondered if Eliza had ventured into his workplace after hours. HR suggested he take a leave of absence to address personal difficulties. The shame that twisted inside him was almost unbearable. He agreed, his face burning with embarrassment. Now, with no job responsibilities to occupy him, Ethan spent his days cooped up in the apartment, analyzing data from the cameras, flipping through the diary. One night, as the wind rattled his windows, he sat at the table, sipping tea with trembling hands. The reflection in the darkened window almost looked like Eliza's for a moment, superimposed on his face. "Why?" he whispered to the empty room. "Why is this happening?" Midnight approached. The cameras were rolling. He tried to stay alert, reading a book to keep his mind busy. Around 1 a.m., his eyelids grew heavy. He dozed off, head dropping to his chest. At 3 a.m., he jerked awake. The apartment was dark, though he was certain he had left the lamp on. He stood, blinking the sleep away. The living room camera's indicator light was off. That meant it was unplugged or powered down. Heart thumping, he flipped on the overhead light, revealing a sight that sent chills down his spine. The camera lay face down on the shelf, unplugged from the wall. The memory card was missing. He felt a rush of panic as he hurried into the bedroom. The second camera was similarly disconnected, lens angled away from the bed. The memory card there was also gone. He felt the kind of dread that makes a person's limbs quiver. It was as if someone had methodically neutralized his surveillance. He tried to recall if he had done it himself during a blackout, but the abruptness and precision of the action suggested a level of awareness he didn't think he had. There was another possibility. A second person had come in, yet no sign of a forced entry, no tampering with the lock, unless he had let someone in. A new text message flashed on his phone screen. "You won't find answers with those cameras. Stop looking, or you'll regret it." He almost dropped the phone. His throat constricted. He sank onto the bed, feeling numb. Who was behind this? Was it a cunning part of his mind, or an actual intruder? The question blurred the line between paranoid fantasy and horrifying reality. In desperation, he made a decision to leave the apartment for a few days, crashing at a modest motel on the outskirts of town. He didn't inform anyone of his whereabouts. He hoped that, away from the space where Eliza emerged, he could stay in control. He took only essential belongings, leaving behind any wig or clothing related to Eliza. For the first night at the motel, he slept better than he had in weeks, though he woke up drenched in sweat from vivid nightmares of wandering around his dark apartment. In the morning, he checked his phone for messages. Nothing. He let out a slow breath. Maybe the break would help. He ventured out for some breakfast at a nearby diner, sipping coffee and trying to calm his restless mind. Across the room, he spotted a reflection in a framed picture on the wall. He froze, thinking he saw a flicker of a figure that looked like Eliza, but it was just a trick of the light. He felt on the brink of paranoia. He stayed at the motel for 2 more nights. During that time, no new texts arrived. He told himself that maybe he had escaped the chaos. On the 3rd afternoon, he finally mustered the courage to return to his apartment. The moment he stepped into the hallway, an uneasy feeling returned. He approached his door, slid the key in the lock, and entered cautiously. The apartment was silent, every object in its place. On the table lay a single envelope. Inside was an old photograph of him as a teenager, which he was sure he'd left in a childhood scrapbook at his parents' house. He hadn't seen it in years. On the back was a cryptic line, "It started long before you realized." That night, Ethan collapsed onto his couch in a storm of emotion, frustration, exhaustion, fear, and a flicker of anger. He resolved that he had to confront whatever was happening, be it an external threat or a part of himself. He texted Dr. Crow, "I need an emergency session. Please let me come in tomorrow." The psychiatrist responded right away, setting an appointment for 9 the next morning. Ethan spent that final night pacing, refusing to let himself fall asleep. Eventually, dawn light seeped through the blinds, painting the walls in pale gold. At Dr. Crow's office, Ethan spilled all the details of the motel stay, the missing camera cards, and the photograph from his youth. Dr. Crow listened, face grave. "We can't solve this alone," the psychiatrist finally said. "This is beyond a typical therapy case. If you suspect you're being stalked or harassed, you should file a police report. Let the professionals investigate." "I'll do it," Ethan agreed, "but I need your help explaining my condition." Dr. Crow gave a supportive nod. "I'll do whatever I can. This is serious. You need protection, and we need clarity." They left it at that, planning to meet a detective. Ethan stepped out of Dr. Crow's office into the crisp morning air, feeling the faintest glimmer of hope. Maybe he'd get answers. Maybe an investigator would find evidence of forced entry or track down the unknown number. He walked with more determination than he'd felt in months. But fate can be merciless. As he turned the corner to head home, his phone pinged again. He stared at the screen. "You went to the shrink again. Big mistake." He looked wildly around the sidewalk, trying to spot who had sent it. Cars zoomed by, pedestrians minded their own business. No suspicious faces leapt out at him. Returning to his apartment, he felt the weight of a million eyes on him, though he saw no one. By late afternoon, he tried to calm himself, preparing to meet Dr. Crow the next day to go to the police together. He was packing a small duffel bag of clothing, just in case the authorities asked him to stay somewhere else, when he heard a noise near the door. A faint click. Instantly, he shut off the lights and positioned himself in a corner, listening. A shape passed across the threshold, creeping into the apartment. Ethan's heart thundered. He tried to see who it was, but the silhouette was too dark. He crouched low, inching toward the phone on the coffee table. At that moment, lightning flashed through the window, illuminating the intruder's figure, a slight frame, wearing what looked like a dark hoodie. Before Ethan could react, the intruder spotted him. Both froze. The intruder dashed for the door. Panicked, Ethan gave chase, bursting out into the hallway. The building's corridor was lit by flickering fluorescent lights. He could hear footsteps sprinting down the stairs. He followed at top speed, nearly stumbling in his haste. A final door slammed at the bottom of the stairwell, leading to the outside. By the time Ethan pushed through that door, the alley was empty, the wind tossing scraps of paper around. Rain began to patter on the concrete. No sign of the intruder. Furious tears stung Ethan's eyes. He realized he hadn't managed to see their face, but their build seemed eerily reminiscent of the stranger from the park. Or was it simply a guess? The intruder wore a hoodie, after all, and lots of people could share that silhouette. Returning to his apartment, he locked the door and called Dr. Crow in a state of near hysteria. The psychiatrist urged him to come to the office immediately, but Ethan felt too scared to leave his apartment again that night. Instead, he settled into a chair, phone in hand, adrenaline coursing through him. He didn't sleep at all. By the next morning, with Dr. Crow's support, he made an official report to the police. He handed over the strange messages, told them about the Polaroids, the intrusive break-in. They took notes, promised to look into it, but seemed cautious about making any promises. He could sense some skepticism in their eyes when he mentioned the cross-dressing and the possibility that maybe he himself had done it while blacked out. He tried to remain steadfast, reminding himself that at least he'd taken this step. A few more weeks passed in tense anticipation. Each day, he called the station for updates. They had nothing to share, no progress. His state of mind was fraying. Eliza hadn't reappeared on camera. He had replaced the old cameras with new ones, but that might have been because Ethan forced himself to stay awake, refusing to let that side of him take over. He consumed energy drinks and coffee, sleeping only in brief naps during the day. Finally, Dr. Crow set up another hypnosis session, determined to see if Ethan could retrieve any memory of the intruder. This time, Ethan sank deeper than before. The psychiatrist's voice guided him, asking him to recall the moment of that break-in, to visualize the figure, any detail. Under hypnosis, Ethan began speaking in a strange, hushed tone, describing the intruder's face. It was glimpsed only for an instant, yet something about the cheekbones or the shape of the eyes felt familiar. Then he fell silent, a tear rolling down his cheek. He muttered about feeling helpless, about longing for peace. Dr. Crow gently brought him back to full awareness, and Ethan woke feeling heavier, as though a part of him was entombed in a thick fog. Even with hypnosis, the details remained murky. He couldn't conclusively identify the intruder. The only clarity was that they seemed intimately familiar with him, as though they'd studied every corner of his life. Several nights later, Ethan sat in his living room, exhaustion etched into every fiber of his being. Thoughts spiraled as he tried to connect dots that refused to line up. Then the phone rang, an unknown number. He braced himself and answered, but no one spoke. He could hear breathing, a gentle rasp, then a faint whisper. "Ethan?" The voice was female. It sent a shock through him. It sounded like Eliza's voice from the camera footage, only now it was outside his head, speaking from the phone. "Hello?" he managed, heart thrumming. "Help me," the voice whispered. Then the line went dead. He stared at the phone in disbelief, a wave of nausea rolling through him. It could have been a distorted voice changer, or it could have been a twisted hallucination, but it felt real, too real. He rushed to Dr. Crow's office the next morning, voice shaking as he recounted the call. She asked for help. It was like Eliza was on the other end. Dr. Crow fixed him with a grave look. "I want you to consider the possibility that this is a severe psychological crisis, manifesting as auditory hallucinations. But the break-in, the packages, the photos, some elements are real events. We can't dismiss them." Ethan slumped in the chair. "I feel like I'm stuck in a loop. If it's in my head, then how did that intruder unplug the cameras? If it's real, then how am I hearing Eliza's voice? None of it makes sense." Dr. Crow sighed. "Sometimes reality gets tangled with what's inside us. We might be facing both an internal fracture and an external threat." At this point, Ethan was ready for any solution. He asked Dr. Crow about deeper therapeutic interventions, even if it meant sedation or medication. The psychiatrist prescribed a mild anti-anxiety medication, hoping to stabilize Ethan's frayed nerves. Yet even that, he warned, might not stop the blackouts if they were rooted in a deeper condition. That evening, Ethan faced the cameras again. He kept them rolling, each device powered with backup batteries, the memory cards protected by a secondary data stream. He settled onto his couch, letting the medication dull his panic enough to slip into an uneasy sleep. When he stirred hours later, the sun was rising. He felt stiff and disoriented, as though he'd been lying in the same position all night. He reached for his laptop to review the footage. With trembling fingers, he started with the living room camera. He saw himself on the couch, drifting off around midnight. Then, about half an hour later, a subtle shift. He rose, eyes half-lidded, a distant expression on his face. The transformation into Eliza began quickly. A wig plucked from a box under the couch, a dress retrieved from behind a cushion he rarely checked. He seemed to know exactly where the items were hidden, as though carefully stashed. Eliza moved around the apartment for a while, rummaging in drawers, retrieving something from the closet. Then, at around 1 a.m., there was a faint knock on the door. Eliza answered it, letting in the slight figure from before, the same person who wore a hoodie. They exchanged words Ethan couldn't hear. The hooded figure pulled down the hood, revealing short hair and sharp features. This was no mask. The intruder was real, a youthful individual who seemed oddly comfortable standing in Ethan's apartment with a quietly determined posture. Eliza stepped forward, eyes bright with recognition. She handed the hooded person a phone, presumably the second phone Ethan suspected existed. The hooded person scrolled through it, typed something, and then handed it back. Eliza looked distraught, as though they were arguing silently. At one point, Eliza even covered her face, seeming to cry. After a few minutes, the figure put a comforting hand on Eliza's shoulder. Then the footage cut out for a second, some glitch, and resumed showing the front door closed. Eliza was alone again, leaning against it, sobbing quietly. She sank to the floor, hugging her knees. Eventually, she stood and walked out of view. The camera didn't show her re-emerge. Ethan's stomach clenched with an uneasy swirl of relief and dread. At least now he knew there was someone else. It wasn't purely in his head. This person might be controlling or coercing Eliza, or maybe they were in league with that side of him. Either way, their interactions were intimate, overshadowed by tension. He quickly checked the second camera in the bedroom. Eliza never appeared there that night, so the living room footage was all he had. He called Dr. Crow immediately, voice cracking as he described the new recording. The psychiatrist advised him to show the footage to the police, but Ethan worried that if he moved too hastily, the hooded figure would vanish. He wanted to confront them himself, discover their motives. Days passed in mounting tension. At times, Ethan spotted a hooded figure lurking near the corner of his street, but he could never get close enough to confirm it was the same person. Then, one night, while scanning the footage from earlier in the evening, he caught a moment that set his pulse racing. Eliza, again, letting the hooded figure inside. This time, it was just before midnight. They seemed to argue again, making frantic gestures. The hooded figure pointed at the cameras, speaking rapidly. Eliza nodded, turned off the living room camera, and they both disappeared into the bedroom. That second camera also went dark soon after. Ethan realized he was losing valuable evidence, so in a burst of panic and courage, he decided to try a third camera he had never mentioned to anyone, not even Dr. Crow, hidden inside a fake air purifier in the bedroom. He set it up carefully the next day, ensuring no outward sign that it was recording. Sure enough, 2 nights later, Eliza and the hooded figure arrived. The main bedroom camera switched off under their direction, but from the vantage of the hidden device, the lens captured everything. They stood close, the stranger's voice inaudible, but from the body language, it looked like they were trying to console Eliza. Eliza clung to the stranger's hoodie, tears in her eyes. The stranger rummaged through a backpack, pulled out a battered folder, and opened it. Eliza flipped through the pages, occasionally shaking her head. It seemed as though they were going over documents or records of some kind. At one point, the stranger cupped Eliza's face gently, as if to say, "I'm here for you." Eliza spoke, lip quivering with raw emotion, though no audio could capture the words. The sense of empathy in the hooded figure's stance was palpable. As the tension in the room seemed to ease, the hooded figure scribbled something on a piece of paper, tore it out, and placed it on the nightstand. Then, with a final shared look, the figure slipped out. Eliza stood there for a long moment, eyes on the closed door, shoulders shaking. Eventually, she too left the bedroom, presumably returning to the living room. Ethan, trembling, advanced the footage until the moment the stranger left. Then he saw Eliza pick up the slip of paper from the nightstand, glance at it, fold it carefully, and tuck it under a pillow. She lay down, hugging the pillow as if it were a lifeline, and the camera feed continued until it faded into the early hours. In the morning, Ethan rushed to the bedroom. The pillow was there, of course, but no note. He tore apart the bedding in a frenzy. Nothing. He felt a surge of frustration, certain that the note contained some vital clue. He thought about the possibility that Eliza might have destroyed or hidden it somewhere else. Despite his exhaustion, he searched the apartment from top to bottom, in drawers, under furniture, inside rarely used cookbooks. Not a single scrap of paper matched the one he saw on the recording. In the end, he slumped onto the couch, a hollow feeling in his chest. The camera had proven that he was not alone in this labyrinth of secrets, but it hadn't yielded the final answers he needed. Whoever this hooded figure was, they had a hold on Eliza, a connection that seemed oddly caring even if it was clandestine. The messages, the phone calls, the break-in, the photograph. It all pointed to a tangled collaboration between his own hidden persona and someone else. Whether it was blackmail, protection, or something else remained unclear. He closed his eyes, burying his face in his hands. Everything felt tangled in a web of half-truths and illusions, and yet he knew that stepping back meant surrendering. He thought of the final image of Eliza hugging that pillow, tears in her eyes. A wave of empathy for this piece of himself washed over him. He realized the only way forward was to keep searching, keep pushing for the truth, no matter how much it hurt or how frightening it became. In the weeks that followed, he continued therapy, braved another conversation with the police, and kept an ever-vigilant watch over his apartment. Little by little, he collected scraps of information, clues about a double life that he had unwittingly embraced, and glimpses of a secret partner who might be either friend or foe. Certain nights, he felt close to cracking the code, capturing a single image or snippet of evidence that would finally lay everything bare. But each time he reached for it, the answers eluded him. Still, he refused to back down. Each day was a test of courage. Sometimes he worried he was chasing a phantom. Other times he believed that Eliza longed for him to unravel the mystery, to help her break free from whatever trap she'd stumbled into. And so he kept going, eyes open to the shadows, determined not to surrender to fear. He would find clarity in this darkness, even if it demanded every ounce of will he had left. That promise, unsteady but resolute, carried him forward into the next dawn, uncertain yet hopeful that someday he would uncover the full story behind Eliza and the hooded stranger who haunted his nights.
Did you like the story? Hit that like button and tell me what you thought in the comments. Do you want to hear more stories? Subscribe and hit the bell. For exclusive content and early access, check out our Patreon. You can find the link in the description, or you can watch any of the videos shown on my right. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.